Up first for this round is Chad Hazen, who is the founder of a brand called Sofee Beverage. Come on up.
I'm Chad. I am a beer nerd and coffee snob, and I'm a home brewer and home roaster, and I was curious at one point in my life to say what would happen if I combined those two ideas. That was Sofee. What it is, it's cold brew coffee, it's agave nectar, and it's bubbles. That's the base of it. I also have some recipes that'll have some real extracts like monk fruit, orange, chocolate, cinnamon, things of that nature. But that's about it, 40 or 50 calories in a can. Now, why did I take Sofee from being something I was making just at home to being here on stage with you all today? A couple of trends I saw happening. One is that cold brew coffee continued to get bigger and bigger, and then the other aspect is that there seems to be everything carbonated these days. You've got, obviously, the kombuchas out there, you've got the LaCroix of the world that have taken off and become huge, and even the hard seltzers that are now out there. So it seemed to me, obviously, that there's this marriage between carbonation and cold brew, ergo Sofee. So what makes it different? Well, CO2, not surprisingly, is not the same thing as nitrogen, so there's a different mouthfeel, a different experience you get out of drinking a carbonated beverage versus nitrogen. The carbonation levels, being a beer nerd, are that of beer, so it's going to drink more like a beer on the mouthfeel than it would of a soda or a seltzer. I'm not the first person to actually come out with a carbonated coffee. There are other brands out there, but from what I've been able to Google thus far, I am the only one who's not putting preservatives in my product. Thanks. So it is different from our perspective, but does that mean it's different from consumers' perspective? Well, I'm a market researcher. That's my background. I commissioned a research study among over 150 drinkers of caffeinated beverages, and indeed, they do believe it is different. A literal 100% of those surveyed said Sofee is different than anything else on the market. As a market researcher, I can tell you it's really rare that a question is answered 100% of the time in one way. If I ask you if the sky is blue, there's going to be some people who say no, and I'm guessing some of you in this room would say that and know who you are. But different isn't inherently good, right? If I put eyeballs in my drink, you probably say, well, that's different in a bad way. Thankfully, I don't put eyeballs in it, and 75% of people say they either love it or like Sofee a lot. The remaining 25% say it's just okay, no one hated it. 80% say that it's better than they expected it to be based solely on the concept, so that is one challenge I know I'm going to have moving forward, is getting people to try this idea. At shelf, there's going to be some real-world impact here. So one aspect is that half of the people who drink things like sodas, other cold coffees, and energy drinks say that with Sofee on the shelves, they'll drink less of those particular products. Word of mouth is still king, and thankfully, 95% of those say that they would actually tell a friend about Sofee. So we know there's a market for it. So who is that market? So far, I've defined this more psychographically than demographically. That's those who are not satisfied with the status quo. What does that mean? Well, they're people who would more likely drink craft beer than the big beers. They're those who would be more likely to go to a food truck than to hit up kind of a chain restaurant. So for them, Sofee is both a figurative and literal refreshing take on those other beverages. In short, which the tagline indicates, Sofee is coffee for the curious. I like the sexy stuff, but I got to get into the nuts and bolts a bit too, and I only have a minute left, so I'm going to do a bit of that. As I mentioned, no preservatives. So, preservatives have a flavor. That flavor is not coffee, so I made that decision to go that route. That said, thankfully, with the labs back, I get 6 months of refrigerated shelf life. Priced competitively, $2 wholesale and around $4 at retail. In my current facility here locally in Redondo Beach, I can produce around 40,000 cans a week. And the idea of moving forward is that I want to keep it local, keep it fresh, keep the idea of craft and small batch, so I will gypsy brew. I've got partners in place throughout the country that I can use their facility to brew and make Sofee there. Finally, I want to touch upon a couple of early successes that I've had. The first being that Gelson's recently picked up Sofee in all of their stores, so it'll be on shelf there very soon. I do have it on the set of NBC's Superstore for some product placement. And finally, I do have a partnership with Tullamore Irish Whiskey to do a cocktail program on premise. That's all I got today. Can't believe that I'm up here right now. The last 2 days have been amazing, and I thank you all so much for having me.
for you. Well done. Kalam, Chad talked a lot about some of the survey results that he came up with. 100% of the people thought it was highly differentiated. 75% liked it or either loved it. How much stock do you place into those survey results, and what do you think of the content?
Well, the proof is in the pudding when people buy it, right? That's the best market research results. But those are great results, so congratulations.
Thanks.
I think that you got to really figure out who that consumer is and how you find more of them. But congrats on the great learning so far.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Mark, it's coffee for the curious. Are you curious enough to invest in Sofee?
Not yet. Not yet, especially for a native Redondo colleague as well. But look, it's interesting. I like it. I think you nailed it. It's different, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's good. I'm not convinced. I'm not convinced that difference is going to resonate with consumers. But the beauty is I love to be proven wrong. So get out there, build the brand, engage with consumers, and let them tell us what they love.
I shall do that. Thank you.
Julie, coffee, RTD coffee is a pretty saturated category at this point. Chad outlined some points of differentiation. What do you think of those points?
Well, I think you do have some unique differences. The agave sweetener is really nice. That's different than most. Non-GMO, gluten-free. I would encourage you to get the certifications. I think that's really important, especially in the natural channel. So I think you're a little different, and yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen carbonation added to a few different beverage categories. Bubbles seem to be a way to introduce a new sort of usage occasion for some of these products. Does it work in coffee, John Craven?
It's definitely been tried before, as you know. I think last one I think of is Stumptown, who tried, making a coffee soda, and it's interesting. I think it just changes sort of the use occasion. For me, like I love coffee. I love, I'm probably exactly what you put up on your sheet, and I shop at Erewhon all the time, right? So, I think this is like, exactly for me, but like I don't see this as a morning beverage. That said, I think, it's one of the better tasting. I'd probably drink this over what, Stumptown produced, for example. My only other thought, just from what I see, the flavor names, like, am I going to admit that I'm drinking a drink called the Masochist or the Hedonist? That's a good way to sound like a creep, I think I would just suggest maybe changing the names to something that just helps, like I don't remember which is which already, So I would just kind of, fine tune that too. But otherwise, I think, there are challenges for this, which is just the use occasion. I think that's the biggest hurdle for a product like this. So.
And that's a great point. In fact, the one research piece I have is it's more like that 3 p.m. pick-me-up is where people are looking at it for. It's rare, very rare they want it in the morning.
Mm-hmm. Ken, John touched on some of the flavor names. In terms of the actual package design, label design, what do you think of Sofee?
I was going to dovetail on John's insightful comments. I think just from a hierarchy standpoint, I would, if you change the names, great. If you don't change the names, some of them are pretty in your face. But just from the hierarchy, I think I would bring the funny names up and then actually call out the flavors, because people don't know what they are. They just know, okay, that's a great name, cool name, clever name. But I think you need to make room for one more sort of panel of information on the front.
What do you think of the taste?
Taste is good.
Great. All right. Well, thank you so much, Chad. Great presentation. Well done.
Yeah.
Thank you all.
Hey, it's Ray Latif with Taste Radio. If you like what you just saw, hit subscribe and ding the bell. You'll be happy you did.